A ripple moved through the silence between stars, a coded cry built from fragments of every language the senders still remembered. Its pulse reached far beyond the collapsing borders of their once mighty civilization. It carried no threat, only a plea. Send us anything. Across the burnt lanes of their empire, beacons flickered and died. Stations surrendered a vacuum. Fleets lay rusting in forgotten orbits. Centuries of prosperity had dwindled to a handful of overcrowded bastions. The archives told stories of abundance, of ships that seeded life on empty worlds, of academies that polished every art. All of it was shrinking into a dark horizon. The message was their last invention, a lattice of meaning compressed into photons and gravity waves, hoping some attentive mind would answer. On Earth, a telescope array stationed beyond the lunar far side woke to an unfamiliar signal. At first it looked like background noise, a smear against routine surveys, until an algorithm flagged impossible symmetries hidden inside. Engineers routed the feed to a lab buried beneath the desert, where a chain of analysts stared at streams of alien data scrolling across screens. They felt the pull of history pressing through static. Months of decoding resolved the plea. A civilization on the brink. Coordinates marked in a desperate coda. No weapons requested, no gold, no slaves. Only anything. The simplicity was unnerving. Governments met in closed chambers. Advisors parsed a request against decades of speculation about extraterrestrial life. Diplomats debated the ethics of intervening in an unknown conflict. Strategists mapped potential traps, while linguists marveled at the elegance of the message. The consensus tilted toward silence, yet silence carried its own risks. Ignoring a dying voice might announce humanity as cold or cowardly, and there was the unspoken lure. Whoever answered could shape the first true exchange between intelligent species. Hidden from public view, another conversation unfolded among those charged with protecting Earth from existential threat. They spoke of a classified program long whispered among defense circles, a venture seeded after the resource wars that almost ended the 21st century. For decades, engineers had worked under polar ice, within lunar caves, and orbital shipyards shielded from telescopes. They called it Project Starforge, though even that was a veil over its real aim, to craft a vessel capable of rewriting any balance of power beyond the solar frontier. Inside think tanks, ethicists warned of contamination, technological, cultural, biological. But the momentum of curiosity outpaced caution. Humanity had crawled from caves, crossed oceans, stepped on the moon. Each leap came with hazard, and each hazard defined what it meant to be human. Leaving another people to vanish when aid might exist felt like betrayal of the very impulse that built civilizations. While debate simmered, eyes turned to the aliens themselves. Their transmissions painted pictures without imagery. Descriptions of cities carved into mountain spines, oceans that boiled with luminous plankton, statues carved to hold back storms. Those messages came less frequently, like breaths from an exhausted lung. Some hinted at warlords devouring the last safe harbors, others at plagues born from collapsed ecosystems. A council of survivors gathered above a shattered world. Their meeting chamber opened a sky where fragments of defense ring glimmered like scars. They wondered whether Earth, a planet that had only just begun reaching outward, could possibly matter. Yet hope had become their only currency. Back on Earth, the leaders of Starforge assembled in a secure hangar. They weighed the cost of revealing their work. The project's existence could upend geopolitics. But secrecy meant little if humanity turned its back on a chance to stand for something larger than any flag. The answer they drafted was brief, stripped of flourish. It promised help but offered no details, only a time stamp for a future arrival. Across continents, a select group prepared for a journey history had never rehearsed. Observers from the alien coalition monitored Earth through outposts hidden in asteroid belts. They saw only fragmentary images, launch pads, rocket exhaust, unarmed satellites. To them, humans were primitive yet oddly deliberate, neither frantic nor indifferent. The aliens had expected either submission or arrogance. Instead, they sensed calculation. This unsettled factions within the coalition. Some urged faith. Any response was miracle enough. Others feared Earth might exploit their weakness or deliver a weapon to an enemy. Their debate was sharpened by hunger and by the memory of worlds already lost. The final weeks before departure pulsed with quiet urgency. Laboratories upgraded comms dishes to maintain contact with the unknown. Logistics crews cataloged supplies. Specialists in biology, diplomacy, and propulsion rehearsed contingencies for plagues, politics, or sabotage. None of them truly understood what waited beyond the beacon's coordinates, but all understood they were preparing not merely a mission, but a statement about what humanity chose to be when called. As the deadline neared, astronomers reported a subtle shift in the aliens' broadcasts. Gratitude woven with apprehension. They were preparing to open their skies, risking whatever strength remained to welcome visitors. For the first time in centuries, their culture spoke not only of endurance but of anticipation. On the appointed day, Earth's transmitter sent a single pulse toward the dying constellation. Its content was stark, an echo of the aliens' own austerity. The message declared that a representative of humanity was underway, bearing assistance beyond material trade, carrying proof of what survival meant when tempered by choice. As the signal sped outward, it threaded a new link between species, one forged not by conquest or bargain, but by an audacity neither side could yet measure. The vast silhouette of the Star Destroyer steadied beyond the outermost beacons of the Coalition, its hull reflecting the pale shimmer of fractured suns. Stations nearest the boundary froze mid-task, their crews staring through viewports at a structure so immense it made their own cruisers look like survey drones. Fear edged wonder. To beings who had bled their resources dry, the arrival resembled a verdict delivered from the dark. Yet the ship's posture was patient, weapons powered but veiled, engines humming low as if mindful of fragile neighbors. Signals swept from the Coalition to the newcomer, threads of inquiry laced with caution. They asked identity, intent, proof of peaceful purpose. A single human voice returned, calm and steady, outlining that Earth had come to honor a plea. The words lacked ornament, yet carried a gravity that settled unease. Translators shaped the message into dozens of dialects, and across ruined habitats, listeners felt something close to relief. The strangers did not speak like conquerors. The first negotiation unfolded through relays, each sentence measured against centuries of mistrust. Humans offered supplies compressed within modular vaults, guidance on energy reclamation, and medical data prepared for alien physiologies. They asked nothing beyond cooperation and the right to land near the Coalition's embattled capital to deploy assistance. Even skeptical delegates noted the absence of tribute or demand. The vessel that could level planets sought only dialogue. Still, politics gnawed at unity. Factions whose power rested on scarcity feared that an abundant ally would dissolve their authority. Spies whispered disabling the newcomers before dependence formed. Others, drunk on visions of shared strength, argued to surrender command and let humans steer their survival. Between those poles stood weary citizens who wished only to see their children breathe without ration masks. As debates tangled, a warning came from scouts. Marauder fleets were sliding toward the system, emboldened by rumors of Coalition collapse. Their intent was not conquest, but plunder, harvest resources, and leave embers behind. Time for negotiation vanished. Coalition leaders turned to the human captain, a figure whose calm gaze had steadied discussion since the first transmission. Permission was granted for whatever response the mission judged fit. Orders moved through the Star Destroyer with disciplined ease. Defensive grids unfurled like metallic petals, releasing satellites that spun webs of shielding energy around vulnerable habitats. Long-range batteries tracked incoming signatures, but remained cold, a visible pledge of restraint. When the raiders breached the perimeter, small craft launched, sleek interceptors designed more for precision than slaughter. They danced through hostile fire, disabling engines, slicing guidance arrays, forcing surrender instead of wreckage. To Coalition observers, the choreography felt like mercy made visible. Parallel teams carried crates of equipment across hastily secured docks. Portable reactors, water filters, and seed vaults were ferried to stations where power flickered and hydroponic gardens lay wilted. Medics in adaptive suits worked beside alien healers, exchanging data through holograms that translated anatomy in real time. The spectacle rewrote assumptions. Strength did not have to arrive with cruelty. Technology could bend toward generosity. Yet not every hand reached out in gratitude. Saboteurs loyal to an old hierarchy slipped aboard a service bay, planting charges near the destroyer's energy spine. Detectors caught anomalies, but disarming them required entry through conduits too narrow for most crew. A junior technician volunteered, crawling through a lattice of pipes while heat shimmered around her helmet. She neutralized the final device seconds before detonation, her effort sealing trust between species in a way no treaty could match. With the threat contained, attention returned to rebuilding. Under the destroyer's guidance, orbital forges restarted, drawing on captured debris for raw material. Agricultural domes expanded, seeded with crops engineered to tolerate erratic radiation. Children wandered fields that had been sterile only weeks before, chasing drones mapping soil quality. Among elders, a slower change took root. The realization that despair need not be a permanent climate. The Coalition's Grand Council convened at last beneath a sky washed clean by stabilized atmosphere processors. Delegates sat at tables carved from meteor stone, facing the human envoys across a plain unmarked by flags. Discussion no longer centered on suspicion, but on frameworks. How to share research without stripping identity. How to settle disputes if prosperity returned. How to explore neighboring systems without repeating old mistakes. Documents were drafted, witnessed by both parties, pledging mutual defense and exchange of knowledge. When signatures dried, a quiet spread through the hall. For the first time in generations, decisions pointed toward birth rather than burial. Outside, citizens gathered to watch a beam of light ascend from the destroyer, broadcasting the core across colonies and satellites. The transmission ended with an emblem joining two constellations, Earth's blue sphere and the Coalition's broken star, bound by a single arc applause rose. Tentative at first, then sweeping outward like wind across long parched plains. The replies sent from Earth traveled for weeks before the receivers decoded its bare promise. Help is coming. No coordinates of fleets, no list of conditions, only the certainty of motion. To the Coalition huddled around their faltering suns, the message was a spark in a cavern. They argued over its meaning, but all agreed that waiting offered more hope than surrender. While they gathered strength to meet whatever approached, Earth tightened its own preparations. Deep beneath Antarctic ice, turbines shuddered awake, driving power through tunnels that led to hidden foundries. Engineers walked narrow gantries above furnaces, where alloys of lunar iron and asteroid nickel were poured into frames designed to survive the crush of warped space. They called the craft rising from these docks the Star Destroyer, though its builders preferred another term whispered only in sealed chambers, a lifeboat armed against extinction. Conceived when humanity first feared its wars might poison the planet beyond healing, the vessel had been shaped as a wager on the future. It was meant to defend, to explore, to declare that the species would not be confined to a single fragile world. Selection for the mission drew from soldiers, pilots, and thinkers who had proved calm under pressures that broke others. They trained in simulators where gravitational fields twisted like storms and engines roared hard enough to shake bone. Doctors and biologists tested vaccines against theoretical plagues. Linguists mapped possibilities of speech between species. All recruits signed an oath binding them not to empire but to stewardship. They would carry the chance of cooperation across an abyss wider than history. The ship itself waited in the shadow of the moon, its hull catching faint sunlight in plates dark as volcanic glass. From a distance, it looked simple, almost austere, but up close the surface bristled with channels for heat, armor interlocks, and emitters tuned to frequencies few telescopes could read. Inside, corridors curved around a core of reactors cooled by helium scooped from the upper atmosphere of Jupiter. Corridors were compact yet warm, lined with murals hinting at Earth's forests, oceans, deserts, reminders of what the travelers protected. Launch day was announced to no public, marked only by a cascade of silent authorizations across encrypted networks. Thrusters pressed the ship clear of its berth, guiding it toward a point where gravity balanced and engines could fire without scattering debris into the orbital lanes. When the main drives engaged, a flare swept across sensors stationed far from home, leaving analysts to puzzle over a signature they could not catalog. Within the command deck, the crew felt weight settle against their harnesses, then lift as the craft pierced the skin of known physics. Jump space unfolded not as color or sound, but as shifting weight on the mind, a sense of standing inside equations too vast for language. Navigators traced currents predicted by mathematics older than agriculture, yet tested only in probes. Outside, stars stretched and bent until they resembled threads drawn through glass. The captain walked the deck slowly, measuring the crew's reactions. Nerves gleamed in faces, but discipline held. They were not tourists. They were couriers of a promise given freely. As hours became days, routine steadied hearts. Engineers tuned field projectors. Cartographers mapped anomalies. Historians recorded thoughts for whoever might study first contact generations later. Meals were shared in a mess whose walls pulsed faintly with readouts from the life support grid, a constant reminder of the thin line between comfort and vacuum. Conversations circled inevitably back to the strangers waiting at the end of the voyage. Some crew imagined delicate scholars, others feared marauders. Yet all agreed the message's humility suggested a people tired of violence. Beyond human sight, the coalition watched telemetry from scouts near their border. Faint disturbances in background radiation whispered of an object approaching faster than any of their own craft could match. Opinions split again. To the weary majority, it meant salvation. To cynics, it foretold conquest wearing the mask of charity. Spies sent encrypted warnings to commanders clinging to the edges of authority, urging contingency plans. The coalition's high chamber, carved from the stone of a moon scarred by bombardment, held its breath through long arguments that ended without verdict. Midway through transit, an anomaly threatened to crush the expedition. A filament of gravity slid across the ship's path, tugging at mass with invisible claws. Sensors screamed until algorithms stabilized the drive. The crew learned how slender survival could be when moving between worlds. Yet the near disaster also confirmed the precision of their tools, gifts of generations who had built with foresight. In the quiet that followed, the mission's significance deepened. Humanity was not arriving as a hesitant supplicant, but as a culture willing to risk itself for strangers. When final calculations placed them a short jump from the signal source, silence wrapped the bridge. Displays traced a single line through darkness, leading toward a cluster of dying stars. There, if mathematics held, weighted the species whose plea had crossed light years. Engines cooled while external armor slid into patterns shaped for both defense and greeting. Orders moved along corridors, firm but calm. No one spoke of victory or defeat, only of duty fulfilled through courage. With a tremor that barely touched the deck, the ship made its last translation. Space returned in familiar black, spattered with cold suns. Ahead, a haze marked systems where reactors still clung to life around wounded worlds. The Star Destroyer steadied, its hull luminous against the void. In that pause before contact, the crew understood the weight of their arrival. They had become a statement carved across distance. That humanity, flawed yet unafraid, would answer when someone called from the edge. The weeks after the Accord were filled with motion. Across the Coalition's worlds, scaffolds rose where ruin had smoldered, and the voice of industry returned to valleys once emptied by retreat. Human technicians worked shoulder to shoulder with local builders, blending tools from both cultures into shapes none had seen before. The Star Destroyer lingered in high orbit, its shadow a promise that the fragile calm would be defended until strength grew from within. Yet in the ship's situation room, calm was only surface. Data from long-range probes showed faint disturbances beyond map borders, ripples that did not match the signature of the scattered marauder clans. Analysts traced the vectors and found that every surge pointed inward toward a single void, a place absent from Coalition charts. Someone had been harvesting weakened systems, stripping atmospheres and magnetic cores, then withdraw before survivors could understand what had happened. The patterns predated the Coalition's fall. They hinted at a predator older than its prey. Reports unsettled the new alliance. Some advisors argued that recovery must come first, rebuilding farms, schools, power grids. Others insisted that ignoring a danger only gave it time to grow teeth. The human captain called a closed council aboard the destroyer. Representatives from every Coalition species gathered around the long table, their colors reflecting in the polished hull metal. Charts floated above them, each flare a wound on the frontier. The captain spoke without ceremony. Security bought by the Accord would collapse if the shadow behind the marauders remained free. But humanity would not dictate. This decision belonged to all who had risked faith in one another. Debate ran through the night cycle. Veterans who had fought to keep stations alive argued that they could not stretch thin forces again so soon. Farmers wanted safety for their seedlings, not rumors of faraway hunts. Yet a younger voice from the delegation of displaced scholars asked what lesson history offered. Every time the coalition ignored small losses, larger losses followed. If courage had brought allies across stars, would cowardice now guard the peace? By dawn, consensus tilted. They would seek the origin of the threat, not to dominate but understand, and if possible, end the cycle of predation. A joint expedition would leave within a month, its flagships drawn from both navies. The destroyer would serve as spearhead, but command would rotate among captains so no single people bore the burden alone. Work began at once. Docks crowded with engineers as human and alien technologies merged. Fusion cells paired with crystal regulators, biosynthetic hull patches grafted to carbon frameworks. Crews rehearsed emergencies in simulators that spanned language barriers with projected glyphs and gesture-tracking gloves. Diplomatic teams drafted protocols for first contact or conflict, agreeing that the new fleet would fire only in defense, even against those who offered no warning. In the quiet of off-duty hours, curiosity flickered behind fatigue. What kind of power could corrode whole systems, yet leave no monuments, no broadcast ideology, no trace of art? Some imagined an empire gone feral, its machines feeding long after citizens perished. Others feared an intelligence bred for nothing except consumption, a living algorithm. The destroyer's archivists trawled through relic signals, searching for myths that might hint at such a thing, finding only fragments of old lullabies warning children not to wander past the silent stars. When the fleet's day of departure arrived, crowds gathered along orbital terraces. They watched a procession of hulls slide from docks, engines lighting in ceremonial sequence. Where one suspicion had split every council, voices now joined in a single chant wishing travelers safe return. As the ships bent space and vanished toward the hidden gulf, an understanding settled to the coalition. Their survival no longer depended on hiding behind borders, but on reaching for answers together.